So here we are in Wargame Red Dragon, the beta, currently available on Steam. And we're just going to take a look at some of the national decks one at a time, and also the coalition decks. So in this case we're taking a look at one of the coalition decks, allowing us to look at both the South Korean and Japanese forces, including the prototypes, together, which you can use as one force. Having coalitions like the Blue Dragons, which are these two, Japan and South Korea, and the Commonwealth, for example, Britain, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and also the Scandinavian nations are all lumped together, I think, and the Eastern European bloc, and I think France and Germany. This allows some more balanced decks. There's less holes in the sets of units, making them slightly better at matching up to the USA and Russia. Although USA and Russia are still obviously ridiculously overpowered. So you have infantry commands, which are pretty good, pretty handy. I like to have them. So here we have an infantry command on a helicopter. So this is good for rushing out and grabbing a distant command position, like a town, where the infantry can be relatively safe and hard to see. So I've added them to the deck, and it's always important to have these sort of APC vehicles for your commands as well. So I've got the K-227, or 277 rather, and that has 2 armor on all sides, as you can see on the unit panel. So you see this panel, it has a bit more detail than it used to have, I think. And some of it can be quite useful. Where is this unit? Here it is. Oh, select it. So you can pin it and you can run the other one against it, all quite handy. But it has a few more details, so we can check it out. So you've got amphibious units that can drive through water, which I imagine is going to be quite useful in some of the river maps, which we haven't seen too much of yet. The beta still has quite a limited selection of units and maps. You can't have any naval units yet, although they are listed. So your nationality isn't actually that important for your naval deck. More or less, the naval units available to you are going to be available to everyone on your side, so either you'll have all the NATO ships or you'll have all the Soviet ships. So it's pretty, it's not really relevant when we're looking at the national decks anyway. Here I've just taken one of each size. Haven't really had a go at it yet, so I don't know how good they are. But we'll find out. Apparently it was terrible in the beta, the closed beta, and so they're currently fixing it. So here we have the basic units, some cargo jeeps and forward operating base. So in terms of infantry, you do get a reasonably balanced set from the South Koreans and the Japanese. I think only the Japanese have a proper ATGM, so South Korea on its own, that would be a problem. But thankfully, since you can play a coalition, you can have both. So we've got the Chumat from Japan, which is the ATGM, which is actually a pretty good one. And then we have the Mistral available to the South Koreans, which is really handy, better than the Stinger for our infantry forces. And then you can go along and try and work out which infantry best. I brought the Kyoto Tai ones. They're pretty decent. You'll notice that they have a recoilless rifle sort of weapon, these heat rockets, and those are pretty useful. Some of the nations don't have any ATGM, but they do have those. So if you look, these guys will arm with that. And although it does less damage to heavily armoured opponents, it can also shoot at enemy infantry. It's good for destroying light vehicles, and it's generally cheaper and almost, I suppose, more accurate because the refire rate is higher. And I think you don't need to keep line of sight, but I'm not sure. So that's pretty good. So you get prototypes for both nations when you have the coalition decks. And if you look at this, for example, the UH-60P is actually really good, even though it appears to be in the wrong order, because it's a prototype unit. It's really fast, and that's quite good for delivering your, well, I suppose it's sort of like Marines to the front line, or SEALs. And yeah, you could bring Pioneer type units. There's a good range. So we move on to support. Artillery have been buffed again, which is a big deal, because it means that if you get hit by a lot of artillery, even if you're in a town, you're going to die. So bringing good artillery is good. The Japanese do have some good artillery units. The 203 SP I liked, so I bring it along. I tend to like a small number of accurate artillery, but you know, a huge barrage of artillery is also quite effective still. In terms of anti-air ability, they do have the autocannon type anti-air, and that is something I appear to have left out of my deck, which I should probably reconsider, because that leaves you vulnerable against enemy helicopter attacks. But what to get rid of? I quite like infrared missiles. because if you remember, the anti-radar weapons absolutely slaughter these hawks. So yeah, that's something I need to think about. Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm going to change my deck on the fly here, because it's quite important to have some sort of autocannon non-radar defense units for the nearest to the front line. Sort of helps to have autocannon type units at the front, backed up by the infrared units, backed up by the radar units. Tends to be how I prefer to have it laid out. So the Hawks are perfectly good radar anti-air. So the South Koreans and the Japanese are well equipped in that category as well as the infrared and the autocannon units. So that's pretty good. I think tanks, they fall down a little. These Kaiu Maru Shiki and these the K1A1 are okay for high-end tanks, but I think you can get better alternatives in like the German Leopard 2, the British Challenger 2, the Abrams. So they're not top of the range. They have some. You have the basic cheap tanks that you can bring along if you're into that sort of thing, and their medium-range tanks I think leave something to be desired. I'm not too impressed by them. Not in my experience anyway. I've taken one of each size because it's good to have a range, but none of these have really convinced me. I reckon these are the best in each sort of price range. So you've got one of the Japanese heavy tank, Japanese medium tank, and a Japanese light tank. So I guess maybe if you played a South Korean only deck, you'd be a bit more limited. The K1A1 isn't massively worse. It's just less accurate and crappier armor. So yeah, actually it probably is quite a bit worse. Recon, this is a good area for the South Koreans and the Japanese as well. The Ninja is actually pretty good. It's a recon with anti-air ability, and that can be handy for picking off the enemy scouts. So if you throw out your 3 ninjas early on, and you can pick off the enemy scouts very early, that can give your team the advantage. They are quite expensive, but pretty good. I brought both because I tend to lose a few helicopters every game, but I like to have some scouts out. And then you have the special forces, which you want to deliver quickly to the front line, and then you have the sort of basic scout infantry and scout jeeps. And that's what I brought. You've got a few options. Nothing that interesting, I think, but recon is critical in the Wargame series. So then we look at the vehicles. Yeah, they have some ATGM units with the TOWs, so that's what I brought, just some TOW 2s. They don't have, I don't think they have, oh no, they do have I-TOWs as well. So you could down, is that a downgrade or an upgrade? It is a downgrade, so you can downgrade a little in the TOW. It's an okay set, it's not amazing, but nothing really missing. And then we move on to the helicopters, and they have a good range. So you've got the sort of gunship type helicopters, and then you've got the specialised anti-tank sort of helicopters. You don't have much in the way of anti-air helicopters or super elite sort of Apache style helicopters, but they can do the job. In terms of the Air Force, it's an interesting area. You've got quite a lot of sort of import planes like the F-16s, the F-4s, and some like sort of homemade planes. You look at the list, like so I tend to go for like a cheap bomber for some napalm. We have each of the things. So you've got the napalm bomber, the anti-radar bomber, the interceptor type plane. This isn't one of the best interceptor planes, but it does do a pretty good job. And you sort of the multi-purpose plane with a bomb and anti-radar or a radar missile for fighting against planes, anti-plane. Their ECM, these guys are okay, but some of the other guys, like this one, no ECM at all. So, it's not perfect, but once again, it's pretty good. You have a bit of everything which you possibly need, so it is playable, definitely. So I think the Japanese South Korea deck, pretty good. I've played it a little. I mean, you end up playing a lot more packed than NATO unless you create all the games yourself. But I have played it, and it does do well. Where was it lacking? Maybe a bit in the tanks. The planes aren't as good as their opponents, but it's pretty good. There you go. Blue Dragons.